Hello there, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Lecciadello.
This is an extraordinary week in American history. The attempted assassination of Donald Trump has upended the presidential race. The Republican convention has gone ahead in Milwaukee. JD Vance is Trump's running mate, and Joe Biden, meanwhile, his grip on the presidential nomination is shaky at best.
In this extended edition of Planet America, we're going to be talking to someone who's been on the Secret Service presidential detail about what went wrong, and also one of the authors of the Democratic Party's rules about what it would take to replace Joe Biden. But first...
2 centimetres. That was the difference between life and almost certain death for Donald Trump this week. And those 2 centimetres may have a profound impact on the future of the United States and the world. Before we look at the political implications, there is the burning question of how this even happened. The United States Secret Service, which is responsible for the protection of the president, former president and their families, as well as major party nominees, failed in that task. How was the would-be assassin able to get a line of sight to former President Trump as he spoke at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania? That lesson had been learned in November 1963, when President Kennedy was shot from a 5th-floor window in Dallas. Or at least we thought the lesson was learned. And it's not like there weren't warnings. This eyewitness told the BBC that crowd members tried to raise the alarm several minutes before the shooting when they first saw a man on the roof with a gun.
And the police were like, huh, what? You know, like they didn't know what was going on. You know, we're like, hey, right here on the roof, we can see him from right here. We see him. You know, he's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
The Washington Post has reported that a municipal police officer, quote, hoisted himself up on the roof to check on reports of a suspicious man, but that officer was gripping the edge of the roof and so not able to access a gun. Butler County Sheriff Michael Sloop telling the Post the officer, let's go because he doesn't want to get killed. And that's when the shooter began firing onto the fairgrounds.
Well, the Secret Service are under real scrutiny as well, John, with ex-Secret Service agent and Conservative commentator Dan Bongino first claiming that Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle repeatedly turned down requests for a larger security footprint around Trump. Now, the agency says that those allegations are an untrue assertion and absolutely false. In fact, they say they added protected resources, tech and capabilities. But then Bongino had more allegations.
I'm hearing there were very few. I don't want to give an exact number, but very few actual, I don't think anyone else has reported this, actual Secret Service poststanders at that site. That they were temp HSI, right. Homeland Security folks, they're great folks. I'm not knocking them, but that's not what they do specifically. We do protection and we're trained for that.
Now, Secret Service haven't actually responded to those allegations yet. They've been too busy pointing fingers at the local cops, saying that they designated the shooter's rooftop as being under the jurisdiction of local law enforcement, whereas the local emergency service unit said that they weren't responsible for securing the rooftop. It was actually under the jurisdiction of the Secret Service. Now, the director of the Secret Service is going to be speaking to Congress about this on Monday, John, so I'm sure that issue is going to feature prominently, as will questions about what the director meant exactly by this.
Should that roof have been secure, period?
That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
Yikes.
Good thing there aren't many sloped roofs in the United States of America, Chaz. But long before the gunman had been identified, much less a motive established, there were those very willing to apportion blame, like Ohio Republican Senator and author JD Vance, who, just days before becoming Trump's running mate, claimed the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. And that rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. And Vance is right to the extent that the word fascist does get thrown around a lot these days, like on this recent cover of the New Republic magazine. It likened Trump to Hitler. And there was this headline in The Nation: just a week or so back, posing the question, why aren't we talking about Trump's fascism? But that's the Liberal media. What about Joe Biden, his campaign? Well, he did reportedly describe MAGA Republican ideology as like semi-fascism at a private fundraiser 2 years ago.
It's not just Trump, it's the entire philosophy that underpins the, I'm going to say something, it's like semi-fascism.
And another Democrat, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, said this 4 years ago.
And as much as he's spewing his fascist ideology on stage.
Although, guess who uses the word fascist a whole lot more?
There is a new far-left fascism. Fascists, they are fascists. We're living in a fascist state.
And what did J.D. Vance think about Trump calling America a fascist state?
I don't care what you call this, but this is not the America that I know and love.
OK, so J.D. doesn't care what we call it, Chaz.
Yeah, I also wonder how J.D. feels about suggesting Trump could be America's Hitler, like he did back in 2016. Now, look, it seems that the rhetoric that's really bothering some people is when Biden said on a phone call to donors last week that we're done talking about the debate, it's time to put Trump in a bullseye. According to Republican Congressman Mike Collins, that was as good as Biden ordering the assassin to shoot. And thus, the local district attorney should immediately file charges against Joe Biden for inciting an assassination. Now, look, I'd argue that Collins's rhetoric incites people more than that bullseye talk does. But if that doesn't, then Marjorie Taylor Greene's rhetoric might, saying Democrats wanted this to happen. They've wanted Trump gone for years, and they're prepared to do anything to make that happen. Now, to be fair, Biden has used a lot sharper rhetoric than that bullseye quote. A few weeks ago, for instance, he referred to Trump as a genuine threat to this nation and a threat to our freedom and a threat to our democracy and literally a threat to everything America stands for. A little bit over the top. And you might have heard that he pulled his ads for a few days after the shooting. But do you know what those ads he pulled were actually about? They were this.
Of course I hate these people.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
And it's more than anger, it's hatred.
It's why Trump stood with violent white supremacists, warned of a bloodbath if he loses the next election, and if he's president again, vowed to be a dictator who wants revenge on his enemies. Now, who do you think that is?
Of course I hate these people.
Now, I could spend 3 minutes talking about how out of context most of the bits of that ad were, and it was just a teensy bit inflammatory, don't you think? Of course, Trump also has a whole heap of charged rhetoric recently, including saying Joe Biden is a threat to democracy as well, and a threat to the survival and existence of our country itself. And this is how much Trump cared about political violence when it was Nancy Pelosi's husband who got his head bashed in with a hammer.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
Not too concerned. Finally, there have been some fingers pointed at Democrat Benny Thompson, because he proposed a bill earlier this year to strip Trump of his Secret Service protection. But we should be clear that that was to ensure Secret Service protection doesn't interfere with a jail sentence. It wouldn't have actually affected this speech at all. Although maybe you need even more protection in a jail, I would have thought. Either way, I do think there's room for common sense here, John. Maybe try not to unnecessarily amp up your base, while at the same time, you can still say what you really think of your political opponents. After all, that's how elections are meant to work, isn't it?
It is so charming and sweet that you would even say that in 2024. But look, when it comes to potentially inflammatory rhetoric, yes, there has been plenty of hyperbole flying around on both sides, but nobody's actually saying it's okay to kill people. Oh, wait.
Get mad at me if you want to. Some folks need killing. It's time for somebody to say it. It's not a matter of vengeance. It's not a matter of being mean or spiteful. It's a matter of necessity.
And that is the Republican candidate for Governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, who is also one of the speakers at this week's Republican convention. And speaking of hyperbole, there was plenty of stuff like this going around from former Trump stalking horse Vivek Ramaswamy.
I personally believe that God intervened today, not just on behalf of President Trump, but on behalf of our country. You saw it unvarnished. He stood up, he took the fire, he took the hit, and still stood up for the people who he stepped up to represent.
Kind of stood up to get off the stage. But Trump himself also believes that there was divine intervention, saying God alone prevented the unthinkable from happening.
Sure, but before we move on, John, we should probably also note that this speculation about who incited who, it really doesn't make a lot of sense when we still don't even know the shooter's motivations. He apparently made one $15 donation to the liberal group Act Blue back in 2021. Then a few months later, he registered as a Republican. So God knows what that means. Some classmates of his described him as an intelligent classmate with conservative leanings, whereas others just said he was a quiet kid who always got good grades on tests and was very passionate about history. So let's face it, we have no idea what this guy's story was. So why don't we just not jump to conclusions, hey? Just this once.
Very good advice. And of course, motives can ultimately be meaningless. Ronald Reagan was shot by somebody who wanted to impress actor Jodie Foster. An elevating motive does risk serving the shooter's own cause. But, as we heard, former President Donald Trump now believes that God alone prevented his death. That is the job of the Secret Service, though, of course, so what went wrong with them? Jeff James served for more than 2 decades in the Secret Service, including on the President's own detail, and he's with us now. Jeff James, welcome to Planet America.
Thank you.
So, to the layperson, what happened last weekend in Butler, Pennsylvania, looks like a massive failure from the Secret Service. What do you think?
Well, I will tell you that the Secret Service thinks anytime a protectee, regardless of who it is, gets injured, it's a failure. It doesn't matter if they get punched in the face or someone throws a pie at them or something as big as we saw the other day where someone is actually shot. This was a failure for sure.
There's obviously been a lot of second guessing about the security on Saturday. In what respects do you think that second guessing has been legitimate?
Well, I think 2 things went wrong on Saturday. One was there was no way that young man ever should have gotten access to that roof. Now, to give you some inside information, the Secret Service runs security of people we protect in series of concentric circles. That very tight circle around the person we're protecting is going to be the agents like you saw who jumped on former President Trump when the bullets rang out. That second ring is going to be mostly Secret Service personnel scattered in with some of our local law enforcement partners. And that outer ring is largely our local law enforcement partners. So when that young man got on the roof, there was 2 ways it went wrong. One was if that agent in the morning when they were putting people on their posts said to one of our law enforcement partners, hey, we're concerned about this roof. This is your responsibility. Make sure nobody gets up there. If people come out of the building who are working, direct them into the metal detectors and so on and so forth. Very specific and codified, as I mentioned. If that happened, then it was the failure of the police officer. But if nobody ever got those directions that, hey, this is a concern for us, you got to keep your eyes on here, don't drop your post, then that's the failure of the site agent who didn't give those very specific directions to one of their post standers. The second thing that I would have liked to have seen done differently is when the president went down, you immediately saw the agents get on top of him. They realized he was ambulatory, so they got him to his feet, which is smart. They've got that big, we call it a body bunker around him, so they have that layer of flesh and body armor to protect him. What I didn't like was the hesitation. If I would have been there, I like to think that I would have rushed him off the stage immediately. We very famously heard him now say, hey, I want to get my shoes. No, we're not waiting for shoes. We're not waiting for hats. We are going.
So the fact that President Trump was shot in the first place, that is a failure. Also, what about the extraction of President Trump and the fact that once he was brought back to his feet, he was still visible as he was taken to the limousine? Was that also a failure?
Absolutely. And we train to have the mental preparation that first shot is just a distraction, or that's just the start, and the real attack is still coming. So if 3 or 4 more gunmen would have started shooting from the tree line, yeah, you're static and you're vulnerable. We train in a lot of ways when we're able to push the person's head down that we're protecting. But I believe that even if they didn't do that, even if they just would have got him to his feet and just started moving with those people around him, that would have been enough to make him a moving target rather than a static target. And you'd see a bunch of heads bobbing around. And at that point, it would have been more difficult to just really focus in on the president's head, more so than allowing him to stand upright and throw his fist in the air.
On that note, one of the unfortunate attacks online has been directed towards the female Secret Service agents. Now I'm going to ignore most of those attacks, but one argument made has been that you shouldn't hire a 5'5" person to guard a 6'3" person because they might need to cover that person by standing directly in front of them, and then they can't cover the entire person. Do you have a view about that?
Yeah, and my view is very frankly, I worked with men who were 5'6". Nobody said a word about it. Look, I worked with female agents who were great. They could shoot better than me and run me into the ground. And there was a time where I could shoot really well and run really fast. So, we have some quality female agents. And, the big thing about the Secret Service is we need people who are going to meet the standards of integrity, physical fitness, dedication to mission, selflessness, regardless of what package they come in.
So, Jeff, just to be clear, you're saying that now iconic image, that moment where President Trump is visible with his fist raised to the air, should never have happened, and that in itself was a failure of Secret Service procedures.
Correct. And if you recall March 30th, 1981, the assassination attempt on President Reagan, when as soon as the bullets started to fly, the president was a blur. Agent Jerry Parr and Agent Ray Shattuck shoved him into the car and they slammed the door shut and they took off. That's how it should look. That was, even though the president was hit that day by a ricochet, which was kind of dumb bad luck instead of dumb good luck. That was the model of how it should happen. And once they realized, as I said earlier, once they realized that former President Trump was ambulatory and he was able to get to his feet and move, they should have been gone.
Now, Jeff, there are plenty of clips online of people saying they pointed out to officers on the ground that there was someone on the roof and yet nothing seemed to happen. Is there any protocol-based reason why that guy on the roof would have been left alone?
No, there's no basis in protocol why he would have been left alone. I think we're going to find out when the investigation comes out how the communication went. And again, this is inside information for your viewers who might not know. But how the Secret Service sets up a visit is we have one large command post, and then at every site we have what's called a security room, which is essentially a small command post. And in that security room are representatives of every agency that's working there. So there's Secret Service, and as I said, Saturday it would have been Pennsylvania State Police, Butler County Police, Butler County Sheriffs, and so on. That way, if someone sees something from any agency, they can call it out. Their representative in the security room can hear it, share it with everybody, and then everybody pushes it out on their frequency, because to try to put that many agencies on a single frequency, it's frankly impossible. It just can't be done. We're going to find out if there was a failure to disseminate that information. If there was a police officer that called out, hey, I got a guy on the roof, we used the front of the podium as 12 o'clock, a guy on the roof at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, there's going to have to be answers as to why no one responded to that.
Jeff James, thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine.
Well, it's certainly also been a good couple of weeks for Donald Trump on the legal front as well. First, in his Supreme Court case claiming sweeping presidential immunity from prosecution.
The justices just made a historic ruling in the case of Donald Trump v. the United States, saying, quote, under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority.
Absolute immunity rather than partial immunity for official acts. That went a lot further than most legal analysts expected. Way too far, according to Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor in her written dissent.
The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. organizes a military coup to hold on to power. Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon. Immune, 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 immune.
And despite suddenly being given new king-like powers, Joe Biden wasn't too happy either.
For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent.
For Trump, of course, it was a significant legal victory, ensuring that legal cases, including the federal January 6th indictments laid by Special Counsel Jack Smith, would now have to go back to the lower court to decide which charges still stand up.
Big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American.
It is a big win for Trump, even in cases that he's already lost. With regards to that Manhattan Stormy Daniels trial, the Supreme Court held that prosecutors cannot cite evidence involving official presidential acts, even to prove examples of private misconduct, like all the Stormy Daniels stuff. Now, Trump's lawyers said that the Manhattan case used evidence from Trump's time in the White House, like the testimony of Hope Hicks, who was Trump's communications director. They also counted as official acts the tweets and public statements that Trump put out when he was president. So if the judge agrees with that, then that is a lot of prejudicial evidence that they used in that trial, which means it might be a mistrial, John.
Yep, that is certainly a possibility. And this week, the legal wins kept coming for Trump.
In a bombshell decision, a federal judge today threw out Donald Trump's criminal case, which alleged that he illegally took classified documents and refused to return them.
In the view of many, Judge Aileen Cannon has been slow-walking this case for months, despite, or perhaps because, it is the most cut and dried set of charges against Donald Trump. That he took, withheld and hid official documents illegally when he left office, then willfully obstructed attempts to retrieve them, all while storing the sensitive and even secret documents in places like a toilet and a bedroom. But the judge threw it out on a perceived technicality over Special Counsel Jack Smith.
She has just dismissed it in a 93-page court document saying that Jack Smith, the special counsel's appointment, violates the appropriations clause and the appointments clause of the United States Constitution.
Now, as Judge Cannon did indicate, the special counsel's office could be restructured to make all of this lawful. The Justice Department has also said it will appeal this ruling, but that could go all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and all of that will take a whole lot of time. And if re-elected, of course, Donald Trump can just appoint an Attorney General to end the case anyway.
Yeah, by the way, if they actually followed her advice, they'd be in a lot of trouble because she ruled that everything after November 22, illegal. All the evidence they collected after November 22, illegal. So if they restructured the way she said, they're going back to square one.
Start from scratch.
Which is why they need to appeal. Now, just to be clear, this case was never going to trial before the election either way, especially not after Aileen Cannon took it over. And I do think it's likely that Cannon's ruling is going to be overturned on appeal by the 11th Circuit and then possibly the Supreme Court, but that will probably be just in time for Trump to become president and then disappear all the charges entirely like you suggested before. So either way, we end up with the same result, which is nothing if Trump wins the election.
These days, the Republican and Democratic Party's national conventions are little more than a made-for-TV pep rally.
All of us pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes.
Lots of speeches from up-and-comers and has-beens.
What do you mean, shut up?
Culminating in the formal nomination of their presidential candidate.
I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
The nominee of the party is already known. They're the one that claimed the most delegates in the various primaries and caucus elections earlier in the year. But until the 1970s, it was at the national conventions themselves, rather than in the state primaries, where the majority of delegates were won. Back then, primaries were an important show of strength for a candidate, but it was in the smoke-filled back rooms where party power brokers decided who would be their presidential nominee. During the convention, state delegations might back one candidate and then switch to another. There was a lot of horse trading, promises made, jobs offered, inducements, even bribes given. All good fun, really. The last time Democrats took more than one ballot to decide on their nominee at a convention was in 1952, when Illinois Governor Adlai Stevenson took 3 rounds of voting to defeat Senator Estes Kefauver of Tennessee. Kefauver had actually won 65% of the votes in the primaries, but the majority of unelected party delegates ultimately backed Stevenson. As recently as 1980, President Jimmy Carter faced the prospect of a contested convention against Senator Ted Kennedy. Carter had enough delegates from the primaries, but Kennedy's supporters thought they could win over enough defectors to claim the nomination. In the end, they failed.
A few hours ago, this campaign came to an end.
Republicans last went beyond the first round of balloting in 1948, when it took 3 rounds to elect Tom Dewey for his second failed attempt at the presidency. The all-time record, though, for a deadlocked convention belongs to John Davis, a former congressman who emerged as the compromised Democratic nominee after a marathon 103 ballots at the convention in 1924 in New York. 58 names were put forward before the dark horse Davis ultimately won. A century later, it is likely that we will see 2 more made-for-TV pep rallies at the conventions, and yet anything is possible. It's only party rules that bind delegates to a particular candidate, and parties can change their rules even at the convention itself. So, as unlikely as it may be, anything can happen.
The best is yet to come!
The 2024 Republican National Convention continues in Milwaukee, in the crucial swing state of Wisconsin this week. Donald Trump has now formally been endorsed as the Republican presidential nominee, and also endorsed his choice of running mate.
Delegates and alternates, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce that Senator J.D. Vance has the overwhelming support of this convention to be the next Vice President of the United States.
This marks a meteoric political rise for the 39-year-old J.D. Vance, who has served less than 18 months as Senator from Ohio after coming to public prominence as the author of the best-selling memoir Hillbilly Elegy, detailing his white working-class family's struggles with addiction and poverty, and his journey to serve in the Iraq War in the Marines, study at Yale Law School. In 2016, he was seen by many Americans as a way of understanding an underclass that was then being drawn towards the populism of Donald Trump. Although Vance himself was not a fan of Trump, at least not at first.
You've said, I'm a never Trump guy, never liked him. Terrible candidate, idiot if you voted for him, might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical a-hole, cultural heroine, noxious and reprehensible.
I was wrong about Donald Trump. I didn't think he was going to be a good president, Brett. He was a great president.
And as well as being able to admit that he was wrong, J.D. Vance is, you have to say, a slick communicator who's remade himself into a Trump-style populist conservative. He would be the 3rd youngest vice president in history for the history buffs, just behind John C. Breckinridge and Richard M. Nixon. But J.D. Vance is not without his critics, although naturally most of the attention this week is focused on Donald Trump himself. And he made sure of that by breaking with tradition to appear in person during the opening night of the convention with a bandaged ear, the emotion of the last few days evident particularly on the face of his eldest son. And there was another boost for Trump this week. He received the endorsement of Tesla founder Elon Musk, who also announced that he would be supporting Trump to the tune of $45 million per month.
That's a nice tune. Certainly good times for Trump, John. He says that he's completely rewritten his convention speech in the light of the assassination attempt against him, and he'll call for national unity. He says he wants to take advantage of the moment to draw the country together. Now, if he actually pulls that off, he could get an imposing bounce out of this week, I reckon, John. But we should probably mention convention security, because that's obviously a huge concern after the assassination attempt. But the good news is they seem to have closed every security loophole.
No ladders, no shovels, no gas cans. No tents, no sleeping bags. The Milwaukee Common Council votes to ban them all. No umbrellas with metal tips, no slingshots, and no tennis balls. No coolers, no glass bottles, no metal bottles, not even canned foods.
That's fair enough. I don't know what would happen to Trump if he ate a vegetable. But look, there is one item that you can still take into the outer perimeter area of the convention.
While you can't bring a water gun, you could bring in a real gun.
However, a long gun or a pistol would be allowed by state law.
Barred from possessing tennis balls, but you can have a loaded AR-15 assault rifle.
And this is all because Wisconsin is an open carry state, and state law prohibits local governments from regulating firearms beyond what the state allows. Now look, I know there are no guns in the inner perimeter of the convention centre, but still, America, what are you doing?
It's a good question. Now, it has been a huge 2 weeks of news out of the United States since our last show, which was on the day of that fateful first presidential debate. A Planet America program break had already been locked in for what is usually a very quiet couple of weeks over the July 4th holiday in America and the school holidays here in Australia.
Yeah, usually. Not so quiet this time, though, was it? Look, it made us feel a little bit guilty, to be honest. So we want to say sorry in our own special way. In fact, just saying it isn't enough. Hit it! Trump and Biden in debate. Trump says Biden's on cocaine. Biden's got a vacant stare. Says that we beat Medicare. Press says Joe is ailing. Jill says Joe is nailing. Poll slump, Dems jump. Elon Musk backs Trump. New York Times headlines call on Biden to resign. Goes on Stephanopoulos, makes an even bigger mess. Newsom, Moore and Pritzker, Buttigieg and Whitmer. All the ghosts of FDR, anyone but Kamala. We should have taken time off, 'cause Joe's been collapsing while we've been chillaxing. We should have taken time off. It's assassination while we took vacation. Biden tries to fix it though. He goes on the radio, almost makes it good again, then says he's a black woman. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Trump now has his eyes on them. Biden says he won't resign unless God shows him a sign. Then he hits the NATO summit, big boy conference. Biden stuffs and thinks Trump is his VP and Putin is Zelensky. Russians still in Ukraine, words are still in Bobby's brain. Scotus gives immunity and Biden loses Clooney. We should have taken time off. You could not enjoy it 'cause the news has spoiled it. We should have taken time off. Till we leave to us all, but it feels like more. Pelosi's making Biden sweat. Bobby's eating someone's pet. Joe is suddenly more tan. Trump's almost friends Ferdinand. Shots ring out on the campaign. Bullet captured in the frame. Donald Duck gets up, yells, "Vice President." Trump has got a VP. Marjo's a conspiracy. Someone's almost blown away, but it is an hurricane. We should have taken time off, 'cause Joe's been collapsing while we've been chillaxing. We should have taken time off. It's assassination while we took vacation. We should have taken time off, 'cause we're collapsing while we've been chillaxing. We should have taken time off. And now we're all sorry. It is still a month until the Democrats will gather at their nominating convention in Chicago, Illinois, and it is still far from certain that President Joe Biden will be their nominee. He has the delegates he needs, or at least he did, but over that last fortnight there has been growing pressure on Biden to step aside following that feeble first debate performance.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Since then, Biden has tried to steady the ship and calm the Democrats running for the lifeboats with rallies.
Well, guess what? They're trying to push me out of the race. Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race.
He's given interviews.
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
A NATO speech.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky.
A press conference.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
A 6-minute Oval Office address.
And in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets.
Battle box, battle box. OK, so more slips and gaffes, although, to be fair to Biden, none of those performances were as bad as the debate, but they weren't good enough to dispel concerns about his age and mental acuity.
Yes, of course they weren't. Look, many of them were on auto cue for a start. You're still stuffing up. And those that weren't on auto cue, hardly impressive. Biden certainly also isn't prepared to do the one thing that he does need to do to sort this all out once and for all.
Would you be willing to undergo an independent medical evaluation that included neurological and cognitive tests and release the results to the American people?
Look, I have a cognitive test every single day. Every day I have that test. Everything I do.
But do you pass it every day? And Trump's not going to be letting Biden off the hook on that one either.
I suggest that we go in together and do a cognitive test. We'll do cognitive tests. We'll do it together like a team.
Would you do it on television live, like a cognitive test on television with him?
I would do whatever they want. I'd do the test. I'd do mental acuity tests with him. I would do whatever would be appropriate.
Worst reality show ever. Things were actually getting quite hairy there for a while for Biden. By the weekend, he had 22 Democratic lawmakers formally calling for him to step aside, and pretty much no one standing up for him. The silence is deafening, said one Senate aide. Biden has no allies organising or whipping on his behalf. The Biden forces have fled the Capitol, and it is failing. Actually, it was even worse than that, because those Biden forces were actually just dumping on Biden to the next reporters. One of Biden's campaign officials actually said he needs to drop out. He will never recover from this. Another person working to elect Biden said no one involved in the effort thinks he has a path. That's his team speaking there. The only thing really keeping Biden in this, other than stubbornness, was the fact that the polls hadn't really changed a huge amount yet. Take the latest Washington Post poll. 85% of registered voters said Biden was too old for a second term, but 81% of voters said that even before the debate. Even 81% of those planning to vote for Biden said he's too old for a second term. And this is what really helped him. When asked, given his debate performance, which of these do you think Biden should do, only 30% said Biden should continue his campaign, whereas 67% said he should step aside. That is for all voters. But amongst black voters, 47% said he should continue his campaign, and only 49% said he should step aside. Still not great numbers, but it was the black voters keeping him in it. And then there was that odd poll which was actually good for Biden, like NPR, where Biden actually gained a point after the debate. He currently leads Trump 50-48, head-to-head in that poll, although admittedly he does trail 43-42 when third parties are added. Still, Biden at the time was clinging to hope that maybe that NPR poll was the correct poll, the others were wrong, maybe. That was until this shooting happened, and then the storyline just changed.
Yeah, it certainly did. With the Trump shooting, the push to remove Biden seemed to have stalled, at least until more polling evidence comes through in the next week or so. Meanwhile, some Democrats are already basically throwing in the towel, with Axios quoting one unnamed member of Congress this week as saying, "We've all resigned ourselves to a second Trump presidency." At least Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez isn't giving up the fight or watering down her language. This is what she tweeted.
If you're a senior Democrat that feels this way, you should absolutely retire and make space for true leadership that refuses to resign themselves to fascism. This kind of leadership is functionally useless to the American people. Retire.
Well, whatever leadership they're looking for, they better decide fast, because the party's supposed to nominate his candidate at the end of the National Convention. That's in a month's time. But the DNC is looking to nominate Biden in an early virtual roll call because of a strange Ohio law that would have prevented Biden appearing on the ballot. Except Ohio has since changed that law, so that early roll call appears to be unnecessary. But the DNC is still planning to nominate Biden early anyway for some reason, before August 7, possibly as soon as July 21, which, if you don't have a calendar, is this weekend. So this shooting could distract from the issue just long enough for the DNC to sneak through Biden's nomination before the Democrats can get their act together to pressure him to step down. Then once that happens, the Conservative Heritage Foundation has vowed to force the Dems to stick with Biden regardless. In court, if they need to, Heritage says that 3 of the expected 6 most contested states have some potential for pre-election litigation aimed at exasperating the withdrawal process for Biden should the Dems try it on. And those 3 states are Georgia, Nevada and Wisconsin. See, I would have thought the Dems would take notice of how much Republicans want Biden to stay on as leader. I think that's relevant. Trump has started actively attacking Biden's critics, for example. He said of George Clooney that Clooney never came close to making a great movie, and he turned on Crooked Joe like the rats they both are. And finally, he said Clooney should get out of politics and go back to television, because movies never really worked for him. Says the guy whose best film work is his cameo in Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. I don't know what's going to happen from here, John, but I do know the Republicans have Democratic House members already lined up about Biden's infirmity with ads such as these.
The scandal of the century. Our president lacks the mental fitness for office, and Mary Peltola covered it up. Peltola met privately with Joe Biden. She witnessed Biden's mental failures up close, but allowed crisis to rage under Biden's frail leadership. Mary Peltola ignored our concerns.
He's one of the smartest, sharpest people I've met in D.C.
Tell Mary Peltola to stop defending Biden when she knows the truth.
Man, the Dems have got so many problems, John.
Well, we're in the solutions business, Chaz. So what is going to happen next? Could we see Biden dumped or replaced at a contested convention? Or is that just the fever dream of West Wing fans? For more on that, we're joined by somebody who literally wrote the book on how America nominates its presidential candidates, ELAINE. She's also a longtime member of the Democratic Party's Rule Committee, so she also helped to write those rules that will decide. ELAINE, welcome back to Planet America.
Thank you.
So, ELAINE, there are reports this week that the DNC is going to go ahead with a virtual nomination of Joe Biden as early as next week to try and end the matter altogether. What do you know about that? Do you know, is that happening?
I don't know that it's going to happen. It was brought about several months ago because the Ohio legislature, the state of Ohio, has a law that says you have to have a candidate. They won't put the candidates' names on the ballot after August the 9th, which is, of course, after our convention. Now, in the past, they've made exemptions for Democrats, Republicans, no problem. This time it got very late. They finally did pass the law, but the law doesn't go into effect for 90 days, doesn't go into effect till September, which, as you can imagine, is past our convention. So this is a safety measure to make sure that the Democratic nominee is on the ballot. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy running around about this, and it's all nonsense, all right? If for some reason Joe Biden dropped out of the race after this vote, nothing is done that can't be undone. The convention would meet on August 19th. It would adopt a rule allowing it to have a roll call vote on the Wednesday of that week, and we would nominate somebody else. So this is a big much ado about nothing, a lot of paranoia, as there always is in everything having to do with politics these days.
So following the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, ELAINE, is the push to pressure Joe Biden to relinquish the Democratic Party's presidential nomination on the back burner, as some have suggested, or is it off the stove altogether, or is it about to reach boiling point? What's the appropriate cooking metaphor we should be using?
I think it's at a low boil, is what I would say. If you want a cooking metaphor, I'd say it's simmering, all right? Obviously, the assassination attempt on former President Trump, kept people from coming out and saying things that maybe they'd planned to say over this past weekend. Now we're into the middle of the Republican convention, and people don't want to distract from criticizing that convention. But the concerns are still there. The concerns are beginning to percolate, not just among the talking class, but among elected officials and most importantly, delegates to the convention. So I'd say it's simmering along.
Now, it seemed to me after the debate, it was pretty clear what Biden needed to do. Yet in the last 3 weeks, he's sat for 2 serious interviews. He's had 1 press conference and he's refused to take a cognitive test. Is that good enough, in your view, to assuage people's concerns about his fitness for re-election?
Well, I don't think he's done it yet. Okay, he's going to keep trying, obviously. He's definitely running out the clock. We're getting closer and closer, which means it's harder and harder for other people to mount campaigns. Okay. And in fact, nobody out there is mounting a campaign to run for the delegates. So I don't know quite what he's doing. We're kind of in limbo here. He has not really put the issue to bed, and yet he has kept other people from getting into the race.
So, Elaine, there are a lot of ideas being tossed around at the moment, but can you outline for us what are the potential scenarios that you can see as to whether Biden stays on or is replaced? What could that look like?
Most likely the move would come before the convention. And most likely people would convince Biden not to run, and most likely Kamala Harris would be the nominee of the party for 2 reasons. One is that she has already been vetted, and this is very important. She's been thoroughly vetted, and she's been in the White House for 4 years, and there's no surprises, right? Nobody else in this field, and there's a great field out there, okay, for 2028, nobody else has gone through the kind of review that presidential candidates go through. And secondly, she's been in the White House for 4 years. She knows what the job is. She knows where our talks with NATO are. She knows where the situation with arms to Ukraine. I mean, she's perfectly capable of stepping into the job. The governors of other states, whether they be Michigan or California or Kentucky, all of whom will be, I think, great candidates in 2028, they're not ready. Okay, they're not camera ready to just take in and run with it, and she is. So I mean, I think the longer this goes on, if somebody convinces Joe Biden to drop out, which is a big if, it will likely be the vice president who takes up the mantle.
Now, you're part of the process which wrote the rules that bind the delegates at the convention. So do you think it's realistic that Biden could potentially face a delegate mutiny at the convention, or is it just too late by then?
Well, remember, I mean, and this is lost in all this discussion, you cannot beat someone with no one, right? You cannot beat someone with no one. So the delegates are not bound. They are bound in all good conscience. So there's a loophole. Delegates can do what they want to do. Joe Biden had said it best in the NATO press conference. He said, those delegates can do whatever the hell they want to do. And that basically is right. But look, if nobody runs, if nobody steps up to run against Joe Biden and he's still in the race, he will be the nominee. I'll remind people, you may not have followed this story in Australia, but when the Democrats took over the House in 2018, there were a bunch of young House members who decided that Nancy Pelosi was too old to be Speaker. Okay, fair enough. She was pretty old. She is pretty old. And they mounted a campaign to say Nancy Pelosi was too old. There was a little problem there. They didn't have a replacement. They didn't have somebody who they wanted to be Speaker, who could be Speaker. So all of this stuff is just nonsense if there's no one who is stepping up to run. In theory, somebody could come up and get the list of 4,000 people, start calling them on the phone and visiting their delegations and saying, look, I think I should replace Joe Biden. No one is doing that. So it goes back to a very simple rule. You can't beat someone with no one.
Elaine, with the benefit of hindsight, was it wrong for Joe Biden to decide last year that he would run for a second term as president this year?
I think it was probably a mistake for him to run again. Okay, I think that his vulnerabilities were there. He had suggested that he would be a one-term president at one point when he ran. I think probably we would have all been better off had he decided not to run.
Elaine, thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, that is all the time we have for this bonus souvenir edition of Planet America. And if you came in late tonight, it is all on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook, with a repeat on the news channel too.
And we'll be back on Friday night at ABC News with a fireside chat, wrapping up the Republican convention and whatever else happens next. See you there.
Bye-bye. Those are cool.